My name's Stuart Wright. I host the Britflix.com podcast every week, and I was grateful to have Vincent O'Connell as one of my guests from. He was promoting the release of this film. Vincent is the screenwriter, and next to me I have Sally Hibbin, producer. Well, I guess this film sort of joins a canon of football hooligan drama that probably started in 1988 with Alan Clark's TV drama, The Firm, but it was Vincent's first film, ID, that brought it to the cinema. And there was arguably a slew of them that followed, more sort of exploitation sort of thing, the football hooligan, and I guess sandwiched between that and this film was Football Factory. But yeah, it's one of the things that strikes me about this film is that it sort of, not does it bring up the notion of the football hooligan up to date, but it brings the notion of being a football fan. I think in the 20 years that have gone by, we had just seen in 1995 we'd seen the sort of birth of the sort of Sky Sports phenomenon. I don't think we actually knew where it was going to go. And in this year, when ID2 gets released, we enter the domain of the world of the football fans' money doesn't matter anymore. And I think whether that was designed into the screenplay or it was a happy accident of what Vincent was covering with the notion of the billionaire owner and the like. I think ID2 pretty much nails where we are with it, but then on top of that, to make it more complicated, we've also got this other drama, which is the notion of communities, which is where football clubs are born. So if the football fan who associates themselves with that community is being excluded, and in addition to that, you've got a change in demographic. I mean, I've come down from East London today for this Q&A, and where I live, I remember news of the mosque being built at Upton Park in West Ham and how that was greeted. So when that storyline appeared in this film, it resonated with reality, not with fiction. ID is quite a strong title in the sense of what is identity. And in this film, I think you've gone further in terms of trying to look at what British identity is.
The first film, ID, was very much about personal identity in the sense of who you are and who you want to be and what the difference is between them. And I think in this one, while that is still a theme in this one, it's extended out to community identity, what community wants to be and what it is and what the difference is between them.
ID1 was a cult hit. It really cleaned up extraordinarily on DVD. And suddenly the rights were up, and a friend of ours said, well, why don't you resell them? And we thought, well, yeah, good idea. And then we thought, well, actually, why don't we make a sequel? So we did.
It was very important to me that making the sequel, we didn't just go over the same territory again, and that we took it into new places, and that we challenged ourselves as filmmakers. I think if you're challenging yourself, then you challenge your audience. So it was quite important that we took a step on, while honouring and respecting the first film, and drawing things, characters and themes from it. I think it was important that we kicked on and did something else. And I think it was over a lunch in Soho that I said to Sally after our first conversation, I said, our lead hero is called Mohammed. And Sally's credit, she didn't bat an eyelid. It's like, get on with it then if you think you can do that. So that was fantastic. I expected every step of the way that someone would be saying, you can't do this, but nobody ever did.
So I mean, I was going to ask that question, because you set the bar high for yourself in terms of trying to tell a modern football hooligan story, in the sense that you go British Asian, undercover, in a football hooligan game. How do you as a writer, Vincent, get into the sort of mind of a conflicted Muslim policeman?
As a kind of deeply conflicted human being, I thought, just like it's the writer's job to sort of find a bit of yourself in someone and explore it. And I think what happened was that I was doing a lot of teaching in a university in London, South Bank University, which has a very highly mixed ethnic student population. And I'd met quite a lot of young Muslim men who I thought were very interesting. Their story, I thought, is a very interesting one. Their sense of coming from a very distinct culture and set of beliefs and existing in a world which is very, very different to those beliefs. And a lot of them were straddling the two worlds. A line we cut from the film was, I celebrate Eid, but I do Christmas as well. And there was a lot of these guys were kind of like exploring themselves and their sense of personal identity through two different and conflicting cultures. And I was very interested in where that takes an individual. And some go wholeheartedly into the culture that has hosted them, and some end up, for all kinds of reasons, because their community gets attacked, retreating into a very much more hard-line position. And then most people are somewhere between those two. So
and from seeing it again, it's sort of, what struck me was, from the supporting cast, the character of Vinny, it struck me that he wasn't so much that he was no longer a copper, he thought he was doing us all a favour in what he was doing. Do you think that the role of undercover is almost going to make you lose sense of you're right and wrong in the job you're doing?
Well, we clearly know that is the case, because of stories that have come out quite recently about people who kind of so involve themselves in a world they kind of belong to it, but in order to belong to that world they have to abandon all personal moral sense. I spent, around the time I was researching the first idea, I spent a lot of time with undercover policemen. I found their company absolutely fantastic. Had some great nights out, which were sometimes quite scary, which included sort of being in a late night shebeen in Moss Side, Manchester, being he and I the only, and Valerie, who's here too, the only white people in this club. And that was a very interesting experience. And he said, by the way, oh no, I'm an undercover cop, and that makes you an undercover cop. So I lived the life for a night, which was quite exciting, but if I had been more sensible, I would have found it frightening as well.
With all the various sort of strands you were trying to weave together in terms of story, what presented the sort of biggest storytelling challenge for you as the screenwriter?
I think the biggest challenge was entering the mindset of far-right activists. I think the biggest challenge was understanding the perspective of people who march with the EDL. Although they're not all that far away from us, I drew on people I'd known in my past. Growing up in Basildon, I remember working with a guy in a sort of summer job I had, who was a National Front guy at the time. And we had a lot of very strong conversations, and there was a kind of mutual respect there, because what we both shared was a sense of we can't just rot and do what we're told and not have something to say about how we live our lives. And we kind of shared a kind of anger about the people around us who were quite, whatever, we'll just go with whatever's happening. So we were responding to very similar things with very different answers. He thought I was a bit of a commie, I thought he was a bit of a fascist, but we found the humanity in each other as well. And I drew on that a lot when I was trying to think, just because they march on the streets and they repel me marching on the streets, marching through Brighton, they absolutely repel me. But I've got to understand that they're people, they're human beings. How do they come to be marching down that street? But that was the most difficult.
I mean, of the kind of changing face of football that your film comments on, the notion of the football fan who doesn't go to the game, but actually associates themselves with the match day event. I mean, I know Liverpool.
Guilty.
Yeah, me too. But I also know Liverpool fans that would go to an away game to go on the bus, sit in the pub, and then go home on the bus. But they won't go to the game because tickets are scarce, tickets are expensive. So I mean, as a football fan, how do you, what would you think you were saying there to sort of through your film?
And so as a football fans too, well, kind of Tottenham. I mean, you know, I'm not sure it counts, but yeah. I mean, for me, one of the big things that stood up for me when I looked at what ID2 would be was how my relationship with football had changed over the 20 years since the original film. I was a complete fan then, and now, like many people, I feel disenfranchised. I feel cut off, remote. It's all become a big sort of soap opera.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the very interesting things, because anyone who follows football understands that for a lot of people, you just can't afford to follow it anymore. You can't go and see your local club side that your whole family for generations has been going to see, because season tickets are so expensive, and people can't even afford to get Sky and BT and all the other sort of franchises that you need, and everyone ends up sort of crowded in a pub watching the game. I think that kind of alienation from the national game was something that very obviously was different from the first time we made the film.
The only woman in the film was really strong, and I loved her. And I wondered if it was important to you how women were represented, because they're a major part of all of those communities, both in the way that they bring up men and the way that they partner men.
I'm very happy you find that. It really was important to me that this wasn't just about men. Like the original ID, which also had two very strong women characters in it. And I was so always knocked out by how many women responded very strongly to that film, which everyone thought was a boys-only film, and it wasn't. I'm heartened that you feel that her character was strong. I sometimes get a bit heartbreak and feel that maybe she wasn't strong enough.
I was just going to say the bit where after Mohammed's just got with Vinny's wife, and he says, I'm really angry, and then it goes into kind of lots of montagey bits and starts fighting, and I'm just feeling a bit torn about whether you think like he not necessarily enjoyed being part of the football culture, because obviously at the end it ends with him being in the mosque and like going back to that. Do you think he ever still felt part of that gang and part of one of the lads kind of thing, or do you think he always knew he would go back to kind of the original?
I think you always enjoy being part of that culture. I think you may feel guilty about it, but you're going to enjoy it.
Certainly, with both films, there's the story of someone in a very predictable, straight-laced sort of environment who, because of their job, is in having experiences that they wouldn't have otherwise had, and finding themselves surprised by how interested they get in that lifestyle. I think that for Mohammed, it was a story about someone learning to get lost a bit, someone who needed to cut himself free from a lot of family and cultural stuff, even if he returns to it at the end. I'm interested in your interpretation of the end, because I think there are, like the original idea, it's an ambiguous ending, which you could read either way, either that he returns to the mosque and to that community, or is he going in there as an undercover policeman? I don't know. I don't really like. Could we even have a show of hands on what people thought about the end? I'd be really interested to know. Did everyone think that he was returning to his original faith?
I don't want to know.
Okay, the producer doesn't want to know.
I'm just very interested to know what response you've had from people who know ID, the first ID, well.
I think some people have not liked where we've taken the second film, and have been have objected to the political content and to the racial content, and we've had quite a lot happening on the Facebook page where people were being extremely critical of the film and comparing it to the first film. And I made a sort of writer's statement on the page. I answered the things that they were bringing up. And that kind of winkled them out of their shell a bit, because there was a coordinated response against the film, which it turned out was coming from the English Defence League, who, once I'd written my very composed response, they had to step it up to keep up the criticism. And there was a lot of, you know, we're not terrorists, we're against terrorists, we're not the IRA. But, you know, it's not so long ago that a Britain Forward supporter, you know, assassinated an elected MP on the streets of Britain.
One of the continuity between the first and the second one is Gumbo.
Yeah.
The character of Gumbo. He straddles the two films, and he, in a way, he straddles what football was and what football is, and certainly the way the film ends, he makes the ultimate protest, I suppose you could say. Or not, yes. What is it? I mean, I guess if you had £1 for every time someone said to you, I fucking love you, Gumbo.
Oh, I'd feel rich. And you hear it was...
You should see the Facebook page. That's all they do, fucking love you, Gumbo.
Just a week ago, I was in a crowded pub, and there's these blokes out for a night. I think it was like a stag do or something, and one of them just hugged the other and kissed him on the cheek and said, "Fucking love you, Gumbo." And I kind of felt weirdly proud.
What is it about his character that's so endearing to people who, you know, I mean, Gizmo's a big part of being a football hooligan. It's not an emotional thing, but there is obviously an emotional bond, and I guess Gumbo is that sort of...
Yeah, when we first talked about ID2, one thing I sort of said, absolute, we've got to have Gumbo back. And we've got to have middle-aged Gumbo and see where he's gone. And thankfully Lee was up for it, Lee Ross, who plays him. And if he hadn't been, I don't think we would have had a film. I think the appeal is someone who's completely straight in a world in which everyone's trying to be something and show off something. He's just himself. And I think that authenticity is always very appealing and very attractive. I think that's his appeal.
I'd agree with you. One of the... We were talking before the screening about the first one being about Reese's character sort of saying, you know, look, you bourgeoisie, you're all dead, you know, be alive, and this will be alive. And then the second one, they're meeting in Le Chien pub, and the billionaires own the football club, and the bourgeoisie have kind of come into that world. They've not, and made it theirs, they've not come alive to it, they've just corporatised it.
And you know, you still, the way that you just learn things about the work you've done. I don't know how many times I've seen it, but seeing it today, I suddenly got caught by the fact that Mo is doing the opposite to what John did. He's saying at the end, I want the school run, I want the mortgage, I want that life, the life that John rejected.
Yeah.
And it just struck me in the face just watching it now. Mo's gagging for that, he wants that.
Well, I must admit, to pick up one of the questions just from the floor before, I thought that Mo's victory, if he had one, was he knew he was a good copper.
Yes,
absolutely. So I felt like that was where, whether he was being a copper in the mosque wasn't something I really thought about, but I thought he went in to do a job, and hierarchies as well. I mean, Jesus, he had the police, he had the foot soldiers, he had the EDL. Got globalised fascist groups. He had no room to manoeuvre, yet he did his job.
I do fucking good police work.
Well,
shall we call it a day, guys?
I think that's the last orders bell.
We can continue down the pub.
It just goes for me to a round of applause for.